Hello, hello, and welcome to another show of Creating Your Desired Life with your host, me, Dr. Esther Graham. And I'm so super excited to be with you once again to basically talk about something that's just very passionate for me, unmuted faith. Unmuted faith. What many of you may not know, and maybe you've heard me talk about it. I grew up, I'm a PK. In other words, I'm a preacher's kid. And I grew up, all my life, in church. And there were so many things, so many good things that happened that I absolutely, totally loved. And yet there were some things I was kind of like, oh, I'm not too sure about this, wasn't feeling this, that what, many times if you've ever grown up in church at all, or in a synagogue, or, a temple, anything like that, and you're involved with religion, there's so many things that come into it. And so I want to say I learned so many great things. And honestly, y'all, my spiritual foundation is really my foundation. That's a strong foundation. But lately, after, there were some things I began to think about that I experienced. And some of those things that I experienced, I did not like at all. And I'm not going to go into a lot of details about all of it, at least not this time. But unmuted faith for me is when I began to say, you know what, I'm going to speak up about this, or I'm going to speak up about that. Because many times when we're silent about something we're very passionate about, that's saying I agree. So sometimes people say, well, I didn't say anything, but saying nothing many times, just all that does is confirm your agreement, or it gives the perception that you agree with some things. And so I just starting a new podcast, and it will be called Unmuted Faith, because I want to speak out about some things that is necessary for us, I believe, as human beings, to live this wonderful, great life that God has really planned for us. For, I like to say, from the day we were knitted in the womb of our mother, and many times we don't live that life because of our foundation, our experience, and we many times can't figure out what the problem is or what really stops us. And so unmuted faith for me is, again, just really speaking out about how I feel about some things, and how you can really make a shift. No matter where you are in your life, you can, through faith, through your faith and your strength, you can begin to make a shift. And what I want to really kind of pull into this in our conversation today is how we can make that mindset shift to where our faith then is strengthened, right? And then our faith then is no longer muted, but it's unmuted. It's speaking out. It's saying, this is what I believe, and this is how I'm going to walk, and this is how I'm going to conduct my life, and this is how I'm going to bring joy and happiness and peace and abundance, whole life abundance, right? Into this is how I'm going to live a whole life. And what does a whole life look like? A whole life looks like I'm not just taking care of one part of my life, but I'm now connecting every area of my life to where I can live holistically. Right? Holistically. And so that's really what we're going to talk about. I'm going to share about a little today. And all of this goes into, when you think about our life by design, that there's a plan for us. And that plan, when we decide to live a life by design, it's really creating this audacious plan, this plan that's just so great, to where that we begin to walk it out. But there are some things that really have to be removed. And I want you to think about, today, where are you right now in your life? And are you living the life that you really, really want to live? Where are you in your foundation, in your foundations? What are your core values, and what are you doing with that? Are you living that life? And so unmuted faith is really speaking about, I'm going to live out my life in faith and in strength. And I'm going to speak out about things that will move me forward. Right? Will move you forward, right? And not things that's going to hold me back. In other words, unmuted faith means as I speak out about this, I'm going to release some things, those things that hold you back, those thoughts, you know, that hold you back. you know uh Many times we've got thoughts in our minds, and really, whether we um understand it or not, it really will hold us back from really walking into our greatness, realizing that we are enough. We begin to realize that we don't have to wait to be chosen, or we don't have to be chosen by anybody, that we can begin to choose ourselves. And so when you begin to have unmuted faith, or when you unmute your faith, let's say, when you unmute your faith and you begin to speak out, and you begin to speak out, and then you begin to move in a direction that moves you forward. It's like a catapult shift, that just catapults you into the next level of living a great life. I don't like to say your best life, because if I say your best life, that means your life before wasn't very good. And I believe as long as you're on this earth and you're living, there's always something good in your life. You may not see it immediately. You may have to go searching for it, but trust me, you're alive, you're here, and that therefore your life is good. And if your life is not where you want it to be, here's the thought: what is it that you need to do? So today, the first thing I'd like to just put in is speaking about, where are you right now? What's that shift that you need to make in your life to where you can walk in unmuted faith, where you speak up, and that your belief system is firm and it's strong, and you can't be shifted right or left in your belief system, right? That it just continues to move you forward. And part of that, in order to do that, we really have to look at where we are right now in our mindset. In other words, it begins with you and it begins with me, the mindset shift. We often talk about a mindset shift, but we never really know, many of us, how we can begin to shift that mindset. And I want to just start with me, because when I began to look at my foundation, where I'm from, my experiences, there were so many things that was great, but yet there were other things that I said, I need to change my perspective and my mindset about this situation, or this experience. What is the story about my experiences that I was telling myself? What's the story about your experiences that you are telling yourself? Have you ever thought about that? Like, what's your story that's always going over in your mind? And what is the perspective that you have of that story? Because we have many thoughts. The National Science Foundation says that on average, we have about 12,000 thoughts per day. 12,000 thoughts per day. And out of those 12,000 thoughts per day, 80% of those thoughts are negative. 80%. And then 95% of those same thoughts are repetitive. In other words, we'll keep repeating it over and over to ourselves. So think about that for a minute. Think about your thoughts and where you are, how you're feeling. Are you enough? Are you not enough? You can't do this. You can't speak out on something. Your experience, maybe you've always been told that you weren't enough, or you're no good. And so that's the thought. Every time you're about to move forward, every time you're about to make a decision, you stop, because the thoughts keep coming that you can't do this. It is not going to work. I want to tell you that that's normal and that's natural, because remember, the National Science Foundation says that we have on average 12,000 thoughts per day, and 80% 80% of those thoughts are negative and 95% are repetitive. So now how do we begin to change that? So for me, I began to look at everything in my life because it starts with you. It starts with you. I began to look at what are my thoughts about this situation? What's my thought about my religion? Or my belief system? What's my thought about, and I say my belief system because I have a relationship. I have a relationship, with God. I don't necessarily, uh, subscribe to the do's and the don'ts, let's say. You know how sometimes you have all these rules that you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't, so many of those things. And I made a decision. This is a part of my unmuted faith. I made a decision that my focus wasn't going to be on the do's and the don'ts. My focus was going to be with building relationship with someone that's greater than I am. Right? Someone that I know that when in my darkest moments that I can trust. And so wherever you are on your journey, whatever your background is, whatever your belief system is, whatever, whatever that is between you and the God that you serve, the God that you're saying, is guiding you. And so this is really what this conversation is about today. This conversation, let me just put a caveat in. This conversation is not about your religion. This conversation is not about in terms of to guide you in your belief system, so to speak. This conversation is about you going inward and really discovering who you are and saying, this is my faith, and now it's time for me to speak up. This is about you rediscovering who you are. And again, starting with you and looking at, these are the thoughts that I have, and this is what I need to shift. When I made a decision that I was going to shift my thoughts, I was going to have an entire mindset shift. When I made my decision to do that, and I began to do the work. I began to look at every thought that I had. I created a thought journal, and I would write the thoughts down that I have about myself and where I am and where I'm going and what are my values. What are my core values? When I began to do that, then my life literally began to change. And so the first thing I want to tell you is that if you can begin to change your thoughts, then you can change your life. And this isn't just something that's just like, oh, this is just something that people teach. No. This can actually happen. That when you begin to change how you see yourself, how you approach situations, how you speak to yourself, how you speak to others in relationships. It all begins with you. And when you begin to change that, then everything in your life can change. Listen, our mind and our heart, there's only 13 inches in between, right? There's only 13 inches from one to the other. So they're very much connected. And I love the saying that says transformation begins in the mind. Transformation begins in the mind. And so if we can begin to change the way we think about things, change the way we see it. And that's why that 80% of negative thoughts that we have every day that we speak to ourselves, let's begin to change that. And when that negative thought comes in, let's stop that negative thoughts and let's replace it with a very powerful, powerful thought. And so for you to begin to realize where you are and your foundation, you begin to look at yourself and what's your thoughts? What are you thinking about? Because many times, I have to take my glasses off for this. Many times we've got so many thoughts. I don't know about you, but I have so many thoughts that go through my mind. And sometimes I have to say, where did that thought even come from? And what I have found that it's necessary, it's very necessary for me to press pause, honestly, on that negative thought and let me now replace it with something that's powerful, something that's good. And notice I said powerful. I didn't say replace it with a positive thought, because you just don't want a positive thought, a positive thought. You want a thought that's powerful, right? It's positively powerful. So I began, when I would hear, the thoughts that would go through my mind that I can't do this. When I began, and said, okay, I knew that I needed to do creating your desired life. I knew I needed to start this program. I knew I needed to get out there and really share some foundational things that for women, especially women, to live a life in abundance, no matter what is going on in your life, no matter what the challenges are, a whole life. Then of course I had the negative thoughts. My thoughts would tell me, nobody wants to hear what I have to say. Who's going to listen to someone like me? Everyone is in the world is doing fine, and they've got other people that they can talk to. I had to literally begin to remove those negative thoughts out of my mind, the thoughts of not being enough, the thought of not having, no one wants to hear what I have to say. I don't have anything beneficial to share. And I had to really begin to focus on what do I have. I began to to look at myself and say, okay, these are the thoughts. And if I continue to have these thoughts, that I am not going to propel forward, that my life is not going to be what I really want it to be and how I really want to live. And so I began to just change my thoughts about so many things in my life. I have to tell you that one of the first things I began to do when I changed my thoughts and I began to move it in a very powerful, positive way and begin to speak to myself and say, yes, I can do this. Yes, I can accomplish this. Yes, I can move forward. My faith became even more unmuted. I began to speak it because, what you believe, that's what you speak. So I began to speak what I believed, but I made sure I checked what I believe. And if my belief was off just a little, I began to look to say, what is it that I need to change to where my belief can be so strong, my faith can be so strong that I could just continue to move. I can just continue to move. Have you ever had it to where you've got this vision for your life? You've got this place where you want to be about your happiness and your health and your finances, your business, your relationships, your just everything, your spiritual life, just everything, your growth, everything. And you're like, but I just don't know what to do. I don't know how to get there. And, and you're like, oh my gosh. It begins with you first recognizing that and then looking and saying, where is it I need to make this mindset shift about how I feel about myself? When I began to do that, I said, I can do that. Someone approached me about a book and I said, no, I'm not ready to write a book. I don't really have anything to say. And they kept talking to me and they said, think about that for a minute. Then I began to think about my life and I began to say, you know what? I do have something to say. Someone said to me, version 1 is better than version none. And I said, yeah, version 1 is better than version none. And I began to write my book, my first book that became a international best-selling, national best-selling. And then so many people reached out to me and said, oh, I loved your book. It was great. It was great. But it began with me making a mindset shift and really talking to myself and saying, yes, I can do this. Really changing the 80% of the negative thoughts that come to my mind every day and repeating positive, right? Positive, powerful, that I can do this. I can write this book. And I remember I sat down and I began to write and I went back over and over and over again because as I read it, I thought, oh, this isn't good enough. No one's going to want to hear it. None of that. And my editor finally said, stop. The book is fine. It sounds fine. And I finally had to release, right? I had to release and say, yes, I'm going to leave it like this. So this is part number one, is what I'm saying, is that when you decide you're going to do something, you begin to shift your thoughts, right? You begin to shift your thoughts on how you see it, how you see yourself, change your perspective, and begin speaking to yourself those powerful things about you. And that's what I began to do. And I wrote the book and it got published. And I want to share it with you. It's called Why? Stepping into Purpose. And it's a book that talks about living by design and living or making a choice to live by default. And of course, you can get this book on Amazon. So make sure you get it. I like to say it's just a basic book that really talks about how you can make that mindset shift in a very simple way and make a decision to live a life by design. And it's really my story about how I had to make a decision to live a whole life and live a life of unmuted faith. And by the way, let me just put this in there. It just didn't happen overnight for me. I am still working on unmuted faith. I'm still working on shifting some things, right? Why? So I can live a whole life. I can live my life to where it's just unrecognizable. When you see me, it's unrecognizable. If you met me last year, 2 years ago, my life right now is just unrecognizable. Why? Because I made some decisions. Right? I made some decisions and it began with me and it began with the entire mindset shift. And that's really what I want to share with you today is as we're going around, there's so many things that's out there in the world, so many negative things that are happening. And so, but we can bring so much positivity. We can just bring powerful things into the atmosphere and to help people. Our lives can begin to increase. Our life can begin to up level. Our lives can totally begin to shift and change when we begin to take control of what we're thinking. When we begin to take control of what's in our thoughts, because in our mind and in our hearts, many times, we've got so many things coming out because out of the heart, right, flows the issues of life. We've got things in our heart. And so it begins, right, to really look at that only 13 inches, right? Only 13 inches between the mind and the heart, that we can just say, wait a second, I can begin to shift, to change my thoughts, which then comes into my heart. And once it comes into my heart, then I begin to speak it out, because then when I begin to speak it out, that I'm speaking what I believe, and that I believe that transformation begins to take place, because now you're going inward. Right? You're going inward and everything begins. And when it begins to get cellular level, right? When you begin to speak it and if you get it through your DNA and your cells, your life will begin to shift. But it starts with your mind first. It starts with understanding, where am I right now? What are my thoughts right now? What am I really thinking about? And what are those thoughts that are not serving me that I'm entertaining every day, day after day after day? And what I would like to encourage you to do is write those thoughts down. I have a journal, right? I'll write those thoughts down. Any thought that I have, and I say, okay, this is a thought that I have right now. And this is a thought that I have to remove. And then I begin to look at what do I need to replace this thought with? And you can begin to look and say, what are some of those thoughts that you want to remove? It. I am enough. And if I am enough is not enough for you to say to yourself, then what is it that you need to say to yourself? So your repetition, your repeated thoughts then can really totally change everything. When you begin to change your thoughts and how you see yourself, then you can begin to change the world around you, those things that you control around you. So here it is, y'all. You change your thoughts, then you literally can change your life. And when I began to really look at my thoughts, And I began to make those small changes, then my life began to change. I began to set healthy boundaries, and that's what you'll begin to do, because when you change your perspective, when you change your thought and your faith, let's say, becomes unmuted, you begin to speak up. You begin to speak out. Then your surroundings will change. You'll begin to set healthy boundaries. You'll begin to recognize and say, this doesn't serve me anymore, and I need to place myself where I can be served, and I can be served, and I can serve others. You begin to see everything around you, your whole life, just differently. Why? Because your perspective about yourself changes. And when your perspective about yourself changes, your perspective, how you view, how you see the whole world, when you change your lenses, then the lenses that you see everything else out also begins to change. You begin to seek out people, surroundings, things that brings abundance and joy and peace into your life. You begin to see how wonderful and awesome and great that you are. And that anything that you put your mind to do, that literally you can accomplish it. You literally can accomplish it. And so some of the steps that I would like for you to do today in this very brief conversation about unmuted faith, think about where you are in your life right now. What are your thoughts? Where is your faith system? What is your belief system? What is your core value? What are the thoughts that keep going over and over in your mind? Where are they right now? What are you thinking about? And I want you to create a thought journal and write those things down. And then begin to cross out and say, this needs to be annihilated. This needs to be annihilated. And then replace it with what you want to think about. Replace it with powerful, powerful, powerful thoughts. And when you begin to replace it with powerful thoughts, repeating it over and over and over to yourself, you can begin to walk some things out. You can walk your faith out. You walk your belief system out. You walk your abundance out. But it starts with you, and it starts with where you are. It starts with where you are. So where are you right now? What are you doing right now? What are you doing? There's a quote, and I love this quote. I'm going to read it to you. And I know that it's not time for the quote, but I love this quote because it's by Lynn McTaggart. And she says, every thought we have is tangible energy with the power to transform. Every thought that we have is tangible. In other words, we can touch it. It's tangible energy with the power to transform. Y'all, that means that every thought that you have can transform your life. What are you thinking about? How can you unmute your faith? A thought is not only a thing. A thought is a thing that influences other things. So the thought that you have will influence other things. The thought that you have will influence other people. We see this all the time. But sometimes what we don't see that it's also true for ourselves, for us. So the thoughts that you have can transform other things. So I think about what I'm thinking about. Those things that are lovely, those things that are great, those things that are pleasant. What are you thinking about? And you can begin to transform your thoughts and therefore transform other things all around you. Help others to transform around you. Why? Because now you're changing. Your thoughts changing. Your perspective is changing. And with that, your faith is growing. As your faith grows, it becomes unmuted. You can speak up. You can say, this is what I think. This is what I believe. It begins with you. it begins with you. We'll be right back in just a second, and I'm going to share some more. Welcome back. Welcome back. So let's just do a little of self-reflection, but I want to give you some things to think about. When you're looking at changing your thought patterns, I want you to begin to think about, what are you tolerating right now in your life? Because what you're tolerating could really be an obstacle. It could be what's preventing you from getting to that next level. It could be what's preventing you from seeing yourself in a different light. It could be preventing you from reaching whatever goals or desires that you have. You know, the show is called Creating Your Desired Life. Your toleration, you could be tolerating something that's not serving you, that's preventing you from creating your desired life. So what are you tolerating? That's one. And then number two is, I want you to begin to define your values. What are your values? What are your core values? What is it that you really believe? You know, I often hear people say that, you know, they're spiritual, or, you know, they're believers, or they have a strong faith, and, you know, all of these different things. And so my question is, but what is it that you need? What are your values? So I want you to look at that. What is it that you really value? And then number three, I want you to think about your non-negotiables. What are some things in your life that you could say, this is definitely a non-negotiable for me? Or are there some things that you need to say, I need to set some non-negotiable standards here. I need to draw a line. So I want you to think about, what are your non-negotiable standards that you have? So for example, for me, some of my non-negotiable standards, one is, I won't place myself in an environment where I don't feel welcomed. I don't place myself, I don't enter into relationships where it's not reciprocal. So those are some of my non-negotiable standards. So what are yours? So I want you to take the time, and I want you to do some self-reflection, and grab your Creating Your Desired Life journal. And I want you to write those down. So just let's go into self-reflection, and let's just take a minute. Remember that your journal, your thought journal, is just for you. And so as you have reflected and you're writing things down, be very detailed, right? Don't just write your values down, but define them. You know, when you're writing your non-negotiables, write it out. When you're writing your toleration list, write that out. Write that out. And once you do all of that, that gives you the roadmap, let's say, to what is it that you need to do, because you'll remove the things that you're tolerating, you will no longer tolerate. When you see that you've got some things that need to be non-negotiable, you will set non-negotiable standards. And believe it or not, all of that will be based on some of the core values that you have identified and defined for yourself. And that will move you into your unmuted faith, faith in you, and then faith in the God that you serve. It will move you into changing your very thoughts, and thereby with the end results of changing your life to where you want it to be, where you want to go, thereby becoming that whole person. I want to tell you, it doesn't happen overnight. It's a progress, right? It's a process, and you have to work on it. And so make sure that you waste no time, and let's begin to work on it today. I want to share with you the thoughts, the thought for the day again, for not just the day, I'm sorry, for the week. Here's the thought, the quote for the week. And so I'm going to read it again, y'all, because I think it's just so powerful. So here's our thought for the week. And I want you to write this thought down, and I want you to post it where you can see it so you can remember this, that every thought that you have is tangible energy with the power to transform. In other words, your thoughts have the power to transform your entire life. A thought is not only a thing, a thought is a thing that influences other things. And so you are an influencer just with your thoughts alone. So come on, let's celebrate yourself, because you're on your road to just totally changing your life. I'm so super excited, right? Because listen, unmuted faith. When you unmute your faith and you believe in yourself, right? You have faith in you, and then you have faith in someone that's greater than you. And you begin to make those mindset shifts, how you change, how you see yourself and the things that you do, and you follow those steps. Your life will be unrecognizable. So what I'd like to do right now is just tell you a little bit about what's going on in the Creating Your Desired Life, the Life by Design community. We've got so many super things going on. Our marriage retreat is coming up in Scottsdale, Arizona. I was just about to say Scottsdale, California. Oh, no, I don't know if there's a Scottsdale, California, but in Scottsdale, Arizona, December 11th through the 15th. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, to my Facebook page under Esther Graham or Festa Della Donna, and the links will be in there. The links will also be at the end of this program. Or this show, to where you can get more information. You can register. It's a marriage enrichment retreat that will be powerful. It's focused on relationship building and being stronger together and really going deeper in your relationship. And as I like to say, to a cellular level. So I hope that you reach out. If you have any questions, make sure that you email me at Esther Graham at fddwomen.com, and we will be glad to share information with you about the Marriage Enrichment Retreat. Also, what's coming up is in December. In December is the Marriage Enrichment Retreat, but in May is the Life by Design Retreat as yet in Cartagena, Colombia. And again, super excited about that. Why? Because all of the retreats, they're not only relaxing and rejuvenating, and they restore you, they revitalize you, but they're so transformative. And the transformation begins from the inside, and it's very evident on the outside. And so make sure that you connect so you can find out what's going on in the Creating Your Desired Life community, the Life by Design community, where our focus is living a life by design and not living a life by default. It's living a life by design that has a strong foundation. It's a life to where we say, this is what we can do and this is what we will do. We don't say, we don't use the word, that we cannot. We don't use the word can. We use the word we can and we will. We can and we will. We don't say why, we say how. right? Because we know that we have the power to transform. We know that we have the power to not just change our lives, but help others change their life and live a life of abundance, crossing that comma, living that life by abundance and living a wonderful life by design. A Life by Design. I thank you so much for joining me today. Please join me on next Monday where we will have our guests come back, our new guest that's coming up. And I can't wait to introduce you to our guest that's coming, Deborah Bradley, the wealthy woman, and Wyvitra Jordan. They will be coming up and with powerful conversations on how we can live a life by design and really reach the things while we're here that we desire to live and to do. Take care. God bless you. See you next time. Bye-bye.